And we're live. Good afternoon, everybody. Today we're going to be talking UFC 260, Ngannou Miocic, and the other fights on that card that were somewhat compelling. We're also going to be talking about the Askren Jake Paul press conference, and we're going to catch up and talk about Hugh's body next on the Bearded Sports Channel. And we're back. So, Hugh, how are we doing this week?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you, mate. How are you?
Doing good. We're back live on the channel, and we have an interesting fight to go over. We have a few interesting fights this week to go over. And first, I would like to find out. So we made predictions last week as to what was going on this week. And I'm getting old. Yes, I'm getting old, and I'm trying to remember, what did I say? Do you remember what I said last week as far as what was going to happen with the Ngannou Miocic fight?
I don't. It's very foggy.
I think I may have said Ngannou was going to be a second round knockout. I think I might have said that, and I think you said something to the effect of Stipe by decision.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, I'm sure about that. And I think also I'm undefeated. The history of the channel, I'm undefeated on predicting UFC outcomes.
Mate, I'm going to start listening to whatever you say and put some money on it. Because you have the golden touch right now, Sean.
I'm on fire.
Full credit where it's deserved. I think you will also recall that I stated definitely on the last fight, maybe even the one before, I could totally see that happening.
Yeah,
and,
certainly.
Yeah, it was, and actually kind of quite typically the one point that I actually backed Stipe, and because I think I said that I always back against him. He's just someone that he's so good at everything, but you almost take that for granted. I thought that I always write him off and he finds a way to win. He'll find another way to win. And he didn't. Did you watch the fight, Sean?
Yes. And I actually, before I went into the fight, I had a feeling, I felt really good about my prediction after the weigh-in, because the gulf in weight, I didn't expect the difference in weight when they weighed in. I think there was like a 35-pound difference. It might have been 25 pounds between Stipe and
yeah, closer than 35, I think.
It was quite big. And that in itself was an issue. But I think after the first round, when you saw the first round, it was just the first punch that landed. And specifically when Ngannou got out of the first takedown quite comfortably, I think at that stage, it was sort of a foregone conclusion, or at least that was how I felt watching the fight. At that moment, there was a no doubter. It was just which round was going to happen.
Yeah, I definitely didn't think it was a foregone conclusion. What I thought is that says a lot. That's a really powerful start. And like, for example, you could see in Conor McGregor against Khabib, his takedown defense was pretty damn good to start with. Like, he got a lot of praise for that, but eventually got taken down later on in the fight easier and easier. So just because someone evaded to start with doesn't mean that you can stop it over the course of 5 rounds. But what I would add is that the first fight that they fought, we saw Stipe dominate from a wrestling perspective. I've never seen him wrestle as a first port of call in any other fight. So I know he's wrestled at a decent level in collegiately, but I'd say from an MMA perspective, we've not seen him dominate. I haven't seen him dominate anyone on a wrestling perspective outside of Francis. So actually, I'm not sure of the caliber of wrestler he is from an MMA perspective, is my point here. When he went in, like you said, Ngannou seemed to deal with it quite comfortably, and then actually turned it around. I wrestled him for that short exchange. Yeah. Started landing some blows and was like, Jesus, we've got a fight on our hands. But what I would say, what concerned me about the fight, just to quickly give my 2 pennies worth, was I didn't like how slow it was to start. That was, it's like you're playing into Ngannou's hands. The way to beat the big guy is to get him tired. And I think now to get him tired, you're going to have to involve a lot of movement, and you're probably going to have to exchange more, there's a risk to that, and we saw what happened. But I think that what you don't want to do is have a really slow fight at Ngannou's pace. So that enables him to last the entire round when he's got his full power, full energy. You want to try and do what he did in the first fight. Was he absolutely broke his will by out grappling him, and Ngannou was just he couldn't you couldn't compete. There's a, with the body weight, you said about 30-pound difference. I just want to make a point on this, because there is some belief, and it's just anecdotal, that around that 240 mark is a really good weight to be, and that 265 actually, although you carry more power, you also carry a much higher load to walk around. You're moving with 30 pounds on you. So at a certain point, endurance kicks in, and it's now a disadvantage. So the 240, people say that you've got that knockout power, but you're also light enough to kind of do the good 5 rounds. So I take your point in that there was quite a significant weight advantage, but it doesn't always turn out to be an advantage. And there's been a lot of fights, i.e. the first fight, which demonstrated it could have worked against him.
I think Rogan, and this was something that I hadn't thought about in the actual broadcast, and this was in the first round, made the point, similar to what you're saying, that there's more muscle means there's more oxygen that needs. So you need to get more oxygen in to be able to maintain. Now I don't know if that's proven or if that's factual or not, if that is a thing. But you
have a higher metabolism. So the more muscle mass you have, you have a higher metabolism. So your body has to work harder to do the same.
Yeah. It's difficult with Ngannou because his last now 4 fights haven't gone more than 2 rounds. So he hasn't really had to sustain that long. I agree with you that Stipe went to, I think after that first punch landed, and he was rocked early. That first punch, it impacted him. And right then he's like, okay, change of tactics. I need to get him on the ground. I need to wrestle him. And I think, it was a big moral victory for how it wasn't the fact that he got out of it. When I saw, Ngannou get out of that takedown, he did so in what looked like a professional manner, not just, he had the physical. Yeah. The way he reversed and got out was a very technical, efficient way of escaping, not just him using his physicality just to sort of brute himself out. And I think that was a very definable moment in the fight, but it didn't. From then on out, it was just it was only a matter of time before he landed, and if anything, it was brutal too. That sort of knockout and that last punch. I mean, he was sent to the hospital straight after that. I've not seen anybody that fucked up after a fight since I've been watching UFC.
Unfortunately, I've seen worse than that. But it was a bad one. Yeah, and I actually didn't pick this up during it. It was, I think, DC that said it, and I thought he was spot on, that Ngannou landed a punch and kind of wobbled Stipe, and then Ngannou was coming in and Stipe fired back and caught Ngannou, and actually he got some traction on it to the extent where Stipe then moved forward and then the punch came. So he kind of, in a way, his success on that counter punch was almost a detriment, because he then went to move in on that and then kind of walked into the punch to put him out. The short left and they said it was a short left, but I think the damage was done prior to that. I mean, Stipe was on his feet, like he had some hard blows landed on him, and at that point, what we've seen before, and it, like that very first round, sometimes it will keep with you. I've seen before, and this is like anecdotal, and hearing what people say, and they don't remember sections of the rounds. So I think people carry that on. So it's like almost a computer game thing, where if you start with 100 and Ngannou's knocked him down to 20, and although it might not look like unbelievable knockout blow, it doesn't need to be, because all the damage has already been done, and it's kind of still there throughout the round. So he looked outstanding. He looked, I think, again, Stipe, you could, if you're going to be harsh, you could maybe say that his, you could have changed his tactics. He could have maybe upped the pace a little bit on the movement front of it, but I just don't think you can take it away from Ngannou. He looked awesome. And I'm, from a personal point, having watched Rogan's podcast with him and listening to his background, I'm just so pleased for him. What a lovely guy, an amazing story.
The UFC, the more I'm so glad you got me into it, because I generally watch boxing, didn't really pay attention to UFC. And boxing, the thing I like about boxing is it's a lot like hitting a baseball or a cricket ball in some regards, in how I compare it, because it takes a real skill set to hit a ball to a bat. And I think in boxing, it's such a strategical thing, because you're so limited in what you can do. getting a knockout in boxing with the protection you have from the pads and the referee. It's when you see Anthony Joshua or Tyson Fury knock somebody out, there's a lot of effort that goes into that point. Now, not that there's more physical effort, but there's a lot more thinking you have to do because you're limited. With the UFC, there's a whole nother level of thinking that goes into that. And I think with boxing, you sort of put up with the personalities to watch, the spectacle of good boxers trying to find a way to land a blow. UFC, the personalities are just so much better to follow. They're so much more likable. My favorite thing about Francis Ngannou is how modest and soft-spoken he is. He is so shit hot right now. It doesn't matter who he comes up against in the next 2 or 3 years. He is so confident. He doesn't even need to get involved in trash talk. He doesn't need, the Colby Covingtons of the world. If he had somebody relative to that in that weight class, I don't see him even bothering getting into that. And I love that. I love that soft, quiet sort of demeanor that I'm Francis Ngannou. Why do I need to even, get into this? I'm just going to knock you out. That's all that's going to happen. And I just love that sort of demeanor. And in the ring, it was just such a night and day thing because he was ruthless. I mean, if anything, I was going to ask you about this. Was it the same ref throughout the whole night? Do they do that with UFC?
Okay. I didn't watch the legitimate broadcast of I didn't watch the whole thing is what I'm stating from start to finish. So I can't confirm that, Sean.
Because it seemed like with some of the other fights that we're going to talk about, that some of the referee didn't protect the fighters as well as I've seen in other previous fights. And I think when Stipe was down, I think I'm splitting hairs. It's very difficult to decide. You don't want to stop a fight too early, but he was down and he was out. He was on his back.
Normally, again, just having to kind of highlight this. Normally, there's a different ref for every fight, and I don't know if they do have. So on the main card, you might have 5 fights, I think it is, and I think you'll have a different ref on at least most of those, if not all of them. So I know the 3 that we're just going to talk about today briefly would have had different referees. I'm fairly sure of that, although I can't confirm it in this case. But normally, from what I see, they'll normally rotate them because there might be 25 minutes on a title fight, so they'd want to give them a rest kind of beforehand without the pressure and everything. And I imagine having a good call, bad call probably doesn't. I don't know. Having a bad call, I should say, really probably won't play into being a great position going into a title fight later on. So I think they purposely kind of separate them to give them that break.
Yeah, and it wasn't so much that fight. We're going to be talking about the O'Malley fight, and that came up again. Should that have been stopped earlier? And we'll get into that in a bit more detail. But moving forward for Ngannou, I know they've talked about a few fights that are on the horizon. I didn't really hear a Stipe rematch. Would that be something we would expect to see at any point?
I think it's first of all, he's going to have to recover from that, and
he's fucked up. Yes,
he really does need 6 months. He needs to rest his brain from that. Genuinely, he's probably had minor brain damage there, which he will probably be able to recover from. It's just going to take time. If he rushed into another fight, he could have an early KO again. Just a kind of a lighter touch could put him down. So he needs to give his brain time to recover from that if he's looking out for himself. It's 1-1. So you've got the rubber match. I think it's almost certain if Stipe wants to continue, I think the likelihood is they'll probably set up John Jones next as he's coming up against Francis. I think then Stipe may well have either Derek Lewis or the winner of John versus Ngannou would be my guess.
So you think John Jones would be the next for Ngannou?
I think he's going to have it without a doubt. And Dana kind of sniffed around that already. Yeah. So I think that's almost certain. Derek Lewis. Rogan said Derek Lewis on the broadcast. Now Derek has just come off the back of a emphatic knockout. Looked great. He's in line. He's the next. He's the next contender to the throne. So he's due a title shot after Francis. So now Francis has won it. You could argue Derek Lewis has got the next shot, right? They've already fought once, and Derek won on a decision, which was one of the shittest fights you'll ever see watching those two. Mind you, Derek Lewis has more knockouts than Francis Ngannou. Let me just reiterate that. You're looking at these two big, beefy men are swinging. They both have to cut to get to 265. It's like you're just like super excited just thinking about it. Someone's probably going to go to sleep. And yet that fight was just horrendous. So I think that a rematch is probably a rematch of Derek Lewis versus Ngannou probably will have more hype than a Stipe rematch.
Yeah.
But I do think that John Jones, he's going to go in for the title because you heard Ngannou say as well, he classed in the post-fight interview, John Jones as the GOAT. So he has massive respect for him. So I think he wants to fight him to prove himself. John Jones said, bring it on. Show me the money, I think was one comment. And he said something else.
It was show me the money. I was just looking up these tweets. I've been working my butt off, gained all of this weight, have never lost a fight before. Now all of a sudden I'm scared. What bullshit. Why does a fighter have to be afraid the second he mentions he wants to get paid his worth? What an insult. I'm going to bite back on that a bit because I know Chael Sonnen mentioned, he said, when he said, show me the money. And Chael Sonnen said, the first time any fighter, says that, he's not ready. If he's show me the money. But my first thought, before I heard anything else, my first thought was, oh, he's saying I'm not ready, but if the money's right, then he'll make, if the money's enough, then he'll maybe go early. That was my first thought. That was the first thing I thought. And he's kind of gotten uptight about that.
Look, so a couple of things to give a backdrop. Chael Sonnen doesn't like John Jones and vice versa. So they have fought each other and Chael just hates his attitude and calls him out at any opportunity. And he'll be the first to admit that. So him having a dig at John Jones is not like being maybe a little bit scared or he's not ready is kind of, I'd say that's very typical. He could be right. He might not be. I think what I would say to the caveat to John Jones's corner is that like, he's the baddest man on the planet. Like he's weighing in at 250 and he's, I would say arguably one of the most competitive people in fighting to the extent that when everyone was saying Khabib's the pound for pound greatest fighter of all time, he's like, hang on a minute here. When his dad's dead, he's still so insensitive. He's coming and going, I need to be in that conversation. You can't be given that award. You can't ask for it. You've got to be given it. And I was like, oh, okay. So I don't think he's going to be necessarily scared to never fight Francis. He'll be very concerned over some of the things, but he's a fighter ultimately. So he's not gonna back down from fighting Francis. And I think actually Francis is going to have his work cut out. Like, mate, that is going to be a massive card. Like, people, because John Jones has beaten everyone. He's undefeated. So, is he going to beat the monster? Like, it's going to be fascinating.
And I think he's not with us, but Kev said if you say give the fight and then the fight doesn't happen, I would believe John. Which I think what he's saying is, and if you're still here, Kev, I think he's saying, of course, I believe John that John does want the fight. I don't think he's scared. But what I would say in what you're saying with Chael, I thought that. So John Jones can get all uppity, but that was the first thing as sort of an outsider, not even someone who knows John Jones that well, knows Chael Sonnen that well. Before I heard Chael Sonnen, my first thought is, why is he referencing the money? That should be a non-issue. And my brain naturally said he's worried. He's worried he's not quite ready. And I think the reason people connect the dots is it was such a scary fight to watch for somebody who might be the next one up. And when I say scary, I don't mean like he's afraid. And of course, John Jones will take the fight and he believes he'll win. But it's got to play at your psyche when you see him dismantle somebody as skilled as Stipe Miocic the way he did.
He's going to be. But again, I think as far as fight IQ, John is. He's so well rounded as well. It's going to make for an amazing fight. I really don't. I don't know because Francis is kind of coming into his. I'd say he's not in his peak yet because he's still young enough to put some more years in and get his jiu-jitsu up and get his wrestling up. John Jones is. I think there's an argument to state that based on how he was winning before and how he is now, he was destroying everyone before, and now he's getting through. He's grinding through results. You could say he's not at his peak. I don't know. That might be a bit unfair.
Yeah. When did he last fight?
DC, I think. Knocking out DC like a legend. So
when was that though?
Let's have a quick look.
Let me have a look here. Because this plays into my whole the reason I was pretty comfortable saying Ngannou, and we talked about this, and I think this comes into play in every sport. Time in, reps, live event. It has and I think if you were to give, let's say Stipe wasn't, knocked out of his world, he wasn't absolutely fucked up to the degree that he was, and he could turn around a fight in let's say 3 months. I have a feeling the gulf wouldn't be as far between the two. I think he fought, like I said, my big issue is he fought a very different physical style fighter. And I just think it's a culture shock to go from what he was doing to, with Daniel Cormier to what he was doing with Francis Ngannou. And I think John Jones might have a bit of that issue where he's going to be a little ring rusty, and he's facing somebody who's coming into their peak.
Okay, I'm talking absolute arse about John Jones, so apologies for that. I've gotten confused. It wasn't DC. So he fought DC. His second fight with DC was back in 2017, and that was ruled a no contest in the end because of his picograms testing. This turinabol testing positive for something. Since then, he had another fight with Alexander Gustafsson, knocked him out. Anthony Smith, he went to a decision with him. Thiago Santos went to a split decision. So one judge felt that Thiago won, but actually 2 judges thought John won. So John won that. And then he went against Dominic Reyes in February 2020. And that's where he got a unanimous decision over Reyes. But I actually felt that Reyes beat him. So he's technically undefeated. I thought Reyes beat him, and I thought Santos pushed him to the wire. Like, that was a really close fight. So he fought just over a year ago against Reyes. Ngannou, like you said, he's been in the ring more recently, but he hasn't had huge amounts of minutes. But I think he's spot on. I think it's undeniable that the ring time definitely counts for something. But also, if you have a look at cumulative reps as well, John Jones has so much more ring time than Francis Ngannou. He has so much more experience and knowledge. Like do you know Dan Henderson? I don't know if you've heard
the name. I don't know him well. Olympic
wrestler or like Olympic level wrestler, absolute legend in the sport of MMA. They went into a grappling. They did a grappling match, and John Jones ragdolled him, just absolutely ragdolled him. So this is a guy that can basically. The last 2 fights that he's been in, they're stand-up fighters. And the judges felt that he outfought them in kickboxing. Then he'll go and wrestle DC and took DC down, who's an Olympic wrestler. He out-wrestles Olympic wrestlers. He's got jiu-jitsu in his game. He's submitted Dan Henderson. He's submitted Lyoto Machida. He's got some submissions under his belt. The guy can do everything. So to see him, the unknown is this, like, he's going up against people at 205, and now he's taken on someone 60 pounds heavier than the weight that he's been fighting at for the last 10 years. So it's been fascinating to see that adjustment. He's big enough for it. He's 6'4". He'll be the same height as him. John Jones will be bigger than Stipe. So the weight difference is going to be, you could argue negligible, but how is he going to adapt to that? I can't wait.
John would have to completely outperform John Jones that fought Reyes. Jones would, so this is from Kev, not be able to take those shots from Francis, which I don't know that anybody's been able to take those shots from Francis, really. I think Stipe's been the closest in the last, I guess, in his last 5 fights. Not the second one, but the first one.
You know what? That Reyes fight, mate, that will come up on because the UFC have got a great thing on YouTube where if a fight does get announced, leading up to it, they'll show one of their last fights or a bigger fight in the last 3 that was quite good. There's a good chance the Reyes one will be in there. And mate, if you get a chance to watch that, it was a cracking fight.
Yeah.
But you'll see that Reyes went for him. Like, he just didn't back down. He was just blasting legs at him and throwing and really going hard at him for 3 rounds. And then John was like, right, let's go, and then just turned it into a grunt fight. Got into grappling exchange, got him down on the ground, and started beating him up a little bit, and turned the tables for the last couple of rounds, and that's what made it close. I got Reyes 1, 2, and 3, but John took the last 2. People thought differently, but so what I would state I'm in agreement with Kev here that if Francis is able to put on the ascendancy and land those shots, Jones is going to be in a lot of trouble. However,
Yeah.
Jones in his weight class is everyone gets knocked out at light heavyweight, including DC. Legends get knocked out at light heavyweight. John hasn't. John is very elusive. So we have not seen John. I think he may have got knocked down. Well, I'm not sure if he's even been knocked down. So actually, if anyone is going to get past a good striker and not get hit and hurt, John has got probably the CV to show that, look, I get hit by the second heaviest people on the planet and no one's knocked me out. So he's a hard person to knock out, is my point.
Yeah, I'd like to see. There's a part of me that feels like this fight now, and this goes back to my belief that, you know, I want to see both of them coming into form at the same time, because there's a small part of me, and I'm ignorant to this whole thing, that feels like John Jones isn't going to be the John Jones he could be in the heavyweight division, because he's jumping in with Francis Ngannou, having not fought a heavyweight yet, and taking on that big, you know, of course he's going to bulk up, but he's got to relearn, from what I understand, he's got to relearn some of his movements with that extra size. He's got to relearn how to manage himself throughout the fight. And it's just, it's for me, I'd like to see him take on somebody else before he takes on Francis Ngannou. Just so I can get those two at the best possible time.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Because DC said this as well. If John Jones loses and gets knocked out to Francis, he's like, put a backpack on Francis. He's going to the moon. This guy, if he beats John Jones, you know, he's going to be the Tyson of the, you know, it's just going to be, anyone's going to sign up for his fight because, you know, you're going to get a knockout. So it's got excitement written all over it. So if that outcome, that's going to be pretty big, you know, but the other outcome is that John Jones has kind of, you know, slayed the dragon, this absolute beast, this behemoth of a man.
That is a great story. Yeah.
To get two titles as well. That's a real two-weight champion for light heavyweight to heavyweight is about as hard as it gets. DC's done it. But fair play. I think you'd have to say he's the greatest of all time if he did that. So you've got two great storylines here.
It will be. And by me saying that, I don't think it would be something. I would love to see it. But I kind of left the Adesanya Blachowicz fight feeling like, I wonder what would happen if Adesanya had more time to get used. Like it was a learning experience for Adesanya. And whilst John Jones has a shit ton more experience, it sits in the back of my mind that if he were to lose to Ngannou with his skill set, what if he spent more time at that weight? You know, could he come back into that weight division with more time, working his way back up?
I mean, this is going to be interesting because John has already admitted to doing this before, that, and I think I've mentioned this, that against kickboxers, he'll purposely try and do kickboxing against them because he's so competitive. He wants to beat them at their thing. So if he's going to play that game with Francis, he's obviously playing with fire. If he wants to go, what's the route to beating Francis? It's making it a grappling exchange and getting him tired. And can you remember DC said Francis needs to be really careful with turning this into a grappling match, because he said he was like keeping it on, and that it's so taxing. So I think John is very clever, whether you like him or not. And I think if he can avoid the initial exchanges and tie him up, Francis is going to be in a world of trouble, because I would put my bottom dollar that if John Jones fought Stipe, I think Stipe would be in a lot of trouble. He'd do what he wanted with it. He'd out kickbox him, he'd out grapple him, he'd out everything. So if Stipe can do that to Francis a few years ago, John can do this to the Francis right now, even with a weight discrepancy, because of what he knows and what he can do. So I know what you're saying, and I think it would. Do you know what? If you fought a Stipe or if you fought a Derek Lewis and beat the crap out of them, it would just hype up the fight even more. But it's what I kind of love about the UFC. They don't fuck around. No. Oh, everyone wants to see these two? Get in the ring and let's go. Like, so they, you know, for those of us that are impatient, they kind of give us what we want to see straight away, which is awesome.
Yeah. Well, it was a good fight, and there's some other good fights that we wanted to talk about, and one of which, and it sort of linked into the conversation about there was a dichotomy between this fight and the fight that we've just talked about, and that's the Sean O'Malley Thomas Almeida fight, because that was I guess a study in how two different fighters handled a knockdown, and it showed, in my view, I'm still learning about Sean O'Malley, and he is impressive to watch, but there was a lot of immaturity in that fight on his part.
Yeah, I love Sean. So I'm biased to the hilt with this guy. I think he's just got that it factor. He's got that kind of X factor going on. He's so skillful at standing up. His switches stance, and he seems very comfortable at both. His punching, his combinations, his kicking, low kicks, high kick combinations, and his arrogance, his fluidity and his speed. He's so fast, and he's a very tall, rangy fighter. So he's got really long legs and long arms. So, and with that combination with his speed, makes him a formidable opponent standing up. And I love watching him. Is the point? But I think you're spot on, Sean. That he knocked him down. I like the fact he's so arrogant enough to say he said I'd be pissed off if I submitted him. If he comes into my guillotine and I submit him, I'm going to be annoyed because I want a highlight reel knockout, and that's why we want to watch him, because he fucking means it, and he wanted that. He wanted to put someone down and then walk away. And Sean, he's done it before. You look at his last couple of fights. I mean, his finishes are unbelievable. And it looked like he had that. I thought that was it as well. I thought it was game over, like he did. And I did hear Michael Bisping throw some heat at him to say that that was immature, and you need to make sure that you finish a fight and don't. I agree. You should be walking away.
I agree, and that's what happened. Ngannou did exactly that. I would say that the Ngannou knockout was in line. If he was on his back and Ngannou went straight in, right down on his face, no stopping. Fight was ended. Almeida was in a position where he was as vulnerable as you could be. His feet were out in front of him. He was on his ass. He was hunched over.
I think he covered up as well. He was ready to lose. I'm about to get hit here. He got ready, I think.
This is the the fight's going to end, and I'm going to try to save whatever brain faculties I have at that stage. And credit to him for coming back into the fight. Because
Jesus,
your analogy of let's say a video game power bar is very relative in fighting, because if you can buy some time, you can get your shit slowly back together. And
you've seen it.
It was a very, but what I would say is with O'Malley, and this was my first time really watching him fight, how impressive his combat. He was overwhelming Almeida with just the confusion and the kicks and the different angles and different directions and the combinations and then the spinning kicks. Just how he caught. For me, you don't see many fighters that can do that type of a kick and land as consistently as he did with that type of thing, because you have to be very quick to pull that off, to not telegraph that. But there was just, even the knockout, he knocked him on his back and he waited like a second. And I thought at that stage, you should have known from the first round that you're still fighting because you didn't finish it off. And the referee, he was down and he was stunned and he stood there for a second and then he went in, knockout punch. The referee jumped in. I think he's impressive. I really look forward to watching him, but it was just a huge dichotomy between how I've seen fighters finish off and how he was just standing back there and watching. I think it's something he's going to have to change.
I think when we're saying maturity, because I'm using that from, I think what you said or Bisping said or both, that I think it's a priority actually, because maturity might count that he's doing something wrong. It just seems that actually his priority was coolness over winning. So he interesting to knock someone out and to walk away because it looks unbelievable. Because when he knocked out Eddie Weiland, he's a legend of the sport. He smashed him and just walked away. The walk away knockout, as they call it, like one punch walk away. It's like so fucking cool, gangster, like film movie tough guy thing. He wants that more than he does want to win in a way, and he paid for that price for going another couple of rounds.
Yeah,
and he maybe he could have got knocked out or something. I mean, that wasn't the case. He beat him up for another couple of rounds, but so that showed the heart of Thomas Almeida. Like what a true beast he was. Like what a hard guy. And Sean rightfully gave him his props there, but I think it was a case that he, and who for we to say that it's the right thing to do is like. Sean is a showman, so he wants to set a highlight reel. He doesn't want to be like nobody. He wants to be the highlight, the main event, the big ticket guy. So he wants to go out and make it fucking cool. And actually, that's because he's that guy. We see these unbelievable spinning kicks and techniques because he's trying to knock someone out like that.
Yeah,
and we get, so we get the benefit of someone having that attitude. But bringing it back to Bisping, who's an ex-world champion, who we all respect massively. Like, if he wants to win a title, he's got to be really careful if he's choosing that process over actually just beating someone.
Yeah, and I don't. me not knocking. This is me looking at him from the perspective of, what are you? And I think that's a really good point. What are your priorities? Is it to win, or is it to win in a specific way? And that I didn't even occur to me. And what I will give O'Malley credit for is he kept his shit together in a situation where a lot of people would have been annoyed and frustrated that that was my thinking at the time. And maybe it's something that's fairly standard practice for O'Malley, but to have had him down and to have had the fight ended, he's now still fighting, and he's let Almeida back into the fight. Like, there's a lot of people that would expend a lot of energy just to sort of, he was very patient from that point on. So on the other side of things, he did show a level of maturity to not just say, I fucked up, I'm just going to go for it. He was just peppering him slowly, even after that point.
Did you see any of the build-up, Sean? Did you hear his interviews or not?
No, because so when and for anybody watching this who's new, I've only come into UFC in the last couple months, and I fucking love it. Some of these fights, I'm discovering these fighters when you're messaging me saying, "Hey, check out this fight." And when we have time, I watch all of the fights for the fighter they're fighting and the fighter themselves. And this was the first time I saw O'Malley, and my first experience of watching him fight was last night. So I didn't see the pre or post fight for him.
Okay, so in the last fight he lost. So he got kicked in the leg. It was one of these kind of calf kicks, and his leg just stopped working, and he was like hobbling around, and then like his knee actually buckled underneath him, kind of twisted in, and he was then hobbling, and then the guy kind of got on top, finished him. He was covering up, his knee had gone, and then the ref kind of came in, and O'Malley was fuming. So in the build up to this fight, people are like, he's been hurt twice now. He broke his foot, and something happened to his ankle, and they're like, has this guy got a weakness? Is he, because he looks quite frail, maybe? Is he just, is he injury prone? Is he not? And O'Malley's listening to this, and he is seething, right? He is like, this is total bullshit. And he was saying, in my head, I haven't lost. And like, well, you kind of lost. And he's like, no, I haven't lost. He said, I've only lost if that guy meant to kick me with his toe in the exact nerve point of my calf. If he meant to do that, then I lost. But he got lucky. It shut down my leg, and he's like, I don't see it as a win. And he said, and he said something so cool. It was like, because his nickname's Sugar Sean O'Malley. He said, we went to the Sugar Sean Athletic Commission, and they discredited the win. he said something along those lines. I was like pissing myself, and he's deadpan as he's saying it. It's like, you can tell he's having fun, but he believes it, and he's in his head. It's like, no, I didn't. And he's like, I did not fucking lose. And he was like, when he won, he was like wobbling his knees. Like, and he said, you know what? It was so satisfying. That was a massive fuck you to loads of people out there that were saying I'm injury prone. He's like, my legs hurt. But he's like, they're as good as anyone's. And I thought he looked super impressive, and I can't wait to see his next fight.
That makes sense, because when the announcer, I did pick up on one thing without any understanding of this. When the announcer announced his name and his record, when he said one, he flashed an O sign.
Yeah.
Like he said it was like 20, whatever it was in one. And the second he said one, he went like this to the camera. So that connects now. But it was a good fight.
I love that.
I'm looking forward to watching Sean O'Malley again. He was very entertaining to watch. And credit to Thomas Almeida for,
full credit.
Oh man, it was just him to be able to stay as long as he was in that fight was incredible.
Absolutely. Too right. It would have been, mate, a lot of men would have just caved at that point. I'm getting totally outclassed here. And he's a stand-up guy as well. Like O'Malley said in the pre-fight, this probably isn't going to go down the ground. He said, I'm ready for it, but this is going to be a kickboxing fight. And then you're kickboxing and you're getting outbeaten quite convincingly, and you go down. Look, most men, and probably myself included, would just hold up and like hope the ref's going to stop it. Like a lot of people would go into that. A lot of people allow themselves to get submitted when they know they're getting out-grappled. Yeah. And he didn't. He fought back against a guy that was out beating him, that was, out kickboxing him, and he carried on getting beaten up for another couple of rounds. It was full credit. Tough dude. Yeah.
Well, speaking of submitted, this kind of links into the next fight, which is Woodley Luque. And I've not watched Woodley fight. I actually did a bit of reading on him afterwards, and he sort of a lot of respect paid to him, given his history from other fighters around the UFC. But this was an example of somebody maybe who allowed himself to get submitted at that point, because that knockout of Woodley, he was really having trouble, incredible for him not to hit the ground. He was walking around like he had just had 35 beers and was trying to keep his legs. At that point the fight was done, and I don't think there was anything he was doing to save himself. And I was looking at his record and listening to, again, it was Chael Sonnen saying how, he's 39 now, and this may be the end of the road for him.
Yeah, I have to agree, really. So he's a champion, ex-world champion, multiple-time world champion, defended his belt against some strong contenders as well. So he's no mug. He's an ex-wrestler. That was his background, but he just learned he's got rocket fuel in his right hand. So he's knocked out some big-time people. So you'll see that combination a lot, Sean. People that are great wrestlers, but they've got that knockout power as well. He's lost 3 on the bounce. So he lost his title to Usman, who got out-grappled for 5 rounds. He then went up against Gilbert Burns, and Gilbert Burns, to be fair, dismantled him, put on the pace. So then he's now lost 2 in a row, and you're thinking, oh, God, this isn't good. And then he lost, who did he lose to after that? Kobe Covington fought him, and I think he lost, probably every round. He's lost almost every round since Kamaru Usman. And now he's going in against a lesser known opponent, although Vicente Luque is as tough as hell, by the way. He's more of an up and coming fighter, got a great reputation, has lost some fights, but he got submitted quite early on. And was it the first round, I believe, the end of the first round?
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't make. Yeah, it was the first round. It was a minute 30 left, I think.
There wasn't a lot. Yeah, there wasn't a huge amount. But look, the thing I've got to say on this, that doesn't look great on paper. You lose 4 in a row, and against descending kind of ability, you would class, then you think that's not good. Like, he's on his way out, and he's 39. This fight, he showed heart, even though it was only 1 round's worth of heart. The other 3 fights, Sean, I would be kicking and screaming in his corner. And I actually saw an insight of Din Thomas that's his coach, speaking to him after he lost his 3rd fight. And Tyrone, it's really weird, mate, because he was saying all the right things, and we're not seeing any of that. So he was like, no, I've still got more determination I'm just more determined now than that. And he was like, Tyrone, like, I want you to take, again, I'm going to butcher this, but it was along the lines of, Tyrone, I want you to take some time. I'm always here for you, mate. I can train you, but I didn't see a man that wanted to win in the ring tonight. So if I see that guy in training, you want to do that, then I'm here for you. But you need to ask the question whether or not you want to keep going. And I thought after his 3rd loss to Kobe, he was going to be done. So I was quite surprised to see him come back. And now he's lost again. We saw more fighting him now than we did in the previous 3. I think you've got to give him credit for that. But I don't, whether it's going to be Bellator, that's what happens to some people. They'll lose a few, come out of contract. He might go to a different organization or might hang his gloves up. It's not looking good for him, though, I've got to say.
It's difficult because no matter what, you can't run away from age. I saw an interview where they were comparing, Ngannou and his evolution and his patience in the fight, which Ngannou referenced in his post-fight interview, that reserve, that, not blowing his load early doors. And there was an element where Woodley, having something to prove, went in just sort of gangbusters and just went all out early doors. And that may be a sign if let's say that was the next evolution of his strategy, that he may not be able to compete, and that may be why Dana White is probably going to look to drop him. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. But it was a good 1-round fight. I mean, there was a lot of action in that short period of time.
Yeah, it actually got fight of the night, didn't it?
He tagged. I mean, he was the aggressor early doors. He tagged
fair play
early. Yeah.
And he went to wrestling again. You don't normally see that with Tyrone. He is a wrestler, but he's like Stipe, just doesn't really show it. He just stands on his feet. But look, I just hope he makes the right decision for him. If he still wants to fight and has the heart, why not? Like if he's still got fights on his contract, but he's got some work to do.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see where he goes. And I think anything else? You had one thing you wanted to bring to the table just to give us an update. There's some news in the world of Hugh.
Yeah. So this is something that was planned. I mean, this is new now in this upcoming week, because as of the 1st of April, Sean, I'm going to be going to Shredville, Tennessee. It's going to be a one-way ticket, no return.
No return.
All in. No return, Sean, one way. I'm going to be going on a cut, and it'll be a cut up until August to back up the bet that I have with some of my friends, I'm going to have a six-pack for the summer for our holiday in August. That gives me over 4 months. So it's going to be 4.5 months to prepare and to diet down. And I'm going to be working with a trainer. And I've been scouting them online. I'm going to be working with someone that's like works with bodybuilders, basically. So I'm going to be taking steroids and
good. I was about to say
getting huge.
Steroids, right?
Well, yeah, that's not for me. I'm going to be doing it natural, but you'll be. I got drunk last night. I had some whiskeys and wine. Last night is going to be the last time I drink until the start of until my holiday. So I'll be giving you updates and let you know how I'm getting on. But I'm actually weirdly excited about this challenge to drop weight and get a six-pack for the summer.
Oh, well, we're excited to see. Sadly, I think it means there's going to be some pictures of you with your shirt off at some point on the channel. I think it's unavoidable.
Hey, come on, be honest. You want to see it as much as everyone else.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I'm happy for you to report on it, and I'll believe you. I'll take your word for it. But I think we will need to get some. Actually, you are going to be doing before and after. I take it.
Yeah, the person that I've approached, the coach, is actually asked for some photos beforehand. I need to disclose my weight, my meal prep over the last few days, what I eat, roughly speaking. So we'll be basing the program on that. So I don't think I'll be disclosing that. Again, I'm not in great shape right now, but it's all been. I cut weight just to give you a very, very quick lowdown. I was up to like 93 kilos in the autumn at some point, at some date. I've got it written down. And I cut that down to 86.5. So I lost about 6 kilos. And because I knew that I was going to be cutting and hiring someone from April, I wanted 4 months worth of cutting, which is a good bodybuilding cut cycle. I've kind of just gradually gone back up now to 90. So I've got like 86.5. I've kind of crept and closed that gap halfway because I've been weight training. I've put on some mass, but I've also put on fat with that too. Yeah. And I've let that slide. I've not counted what I'm eating. All in the aim that, look, I know that I'm going to be switching it on for April. So mate, here goes. I'm putting myself out there. I'm going to be putting this out on social media as well. And I'm really determined to get into some killer shape. So wish me luck.
Well, we'll be getting your updates. I think every couple of weeks we'll be checking in on the Hugh Shred plan, see how you're progressing. So that's us done for this week. For everybody who did jump in, thank you, Kev, for the comments.
Thank you, Kev.
Do like and subscribe. Join us so we can get more people in on the conversation. Next week, well, we'll see what we're going to talk about next week. Hugh, we have the Masters coming up in 2 weeks, which I know you're really excited about. So we'll keep that in mind. Really excited. But to everybody who's joined, thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll catch up with you soon. Take care, everybody.
See ya.